right, welcome back to the DudeYouPodcast, episode number 28. I'm Andrew Hall. You can find me on the tweets at DudeYouCrazy. Joining me, as always, is Daniel Palmer, DPalm66 on the Twitter machine. Daniel Palmer, what's going on, man?
Not much. It's gotten really, really cold in Philadelphia. Like, the high, I guess the low on Saturday is 24, so I won't be leaving my house at all. And it reminds me why I hate the Northeast. So, there we go.
Man, that's brutal. Joining us today is the Honorable Mr. Glenn Moyer. Glenn, what's your handle on Twitter?
Glenn, that's 2 N's, second N is silent, _ Moyer.
Now, should we spell underscore, or is it the symbol?
That's second thing.
I just stole Chad _ Floyd's joke because Chad, the intern, is not here. He said he had something that we're not acknowledging tonight. So Chad is not sorely missed, but for those who don't know, and that's probably most of us, Glenn, tell us a little bit about yourself. Quick bio.
Let's see. Got Coach right here in the mix. I originally from Georgia. Know Andrew from a friend of a friend that went to UGA. Probably define myself as mostly a baseball fan. I know that D-Palm went in depth about the whole Braves move a couple podcasts back. I'm a big Braves fan myself. Let's see. Spent some time in the Navy. Out now in the reserve side only, and work for a rug company. Really exciting stuff.
Yeah, if you need memory foam bath mats that can double as dog beds, Glenn's your guy. He is hooking me up. Palmer, we haven't chatted. At least I haven't been on here in a while. What'd you do last weekend?
Last weekend, the girlfriend went up to New York, so I had a nice Daniel weekend with me and the dog, and it was actually pretty nice out, and went on long walks, and very boring, and watched I watched a lot of college football to a point, and then I stopped watching football altogether for the rest of the weekend. Yeah, it was nice. I don't think you see it. It was nice to have a quiet house to myself. Got some reading done. Caught up with some of my shows. Sons of Anarchy is getting really good. But beyond that, just nothing of note. I'm boring, and I don't know anyone in Philadelphia.
I hear you. I went up to D.C. last weekend. That's why I've been really out of touch. I don't know if you travel much for work, but the thing I hate about traveling is, like, work back at the office doesn't stop. No one gets the memo that you're out of town. So this week's just been kind of scramble mode, catching up, all that crap. But I did watch some football. If you listen to this podcast regularly, we don't dwell on Georgia games, win, lose, or draw, so we're not going to mention that much. But we've had some good articles on the website, DudeYouCrazy.net, this week. I encourage you to check them out. Daniel Palmer, as always, nailed his knee-jerk reactions to the wall, and sometimes sadder than others. Chad did a really good kind of late-season recap that was kind of cool. Did some GIF images of big plays, and check all that out on DudeYouCrazy.net. I promise I'm going to get a little more active there. Tomorrow, which is Friday, the day this airs, I will be doing a recap of Aaron Murray's career as told by me. As I point out on there, my words are not sufficient to his career, but at least the timing makes sense, and that I started writing about football the same week that Aaron Murray started his collegiate career. So I've got a really piss-poor collection of thoughts on Aaron Murray through the years. But let's talk football. Let's talk this week, but we're going to look at a more broad scale. Let's start by talking. We're not going to hit every game in the SEC. There's not a whole lot we wanted to chat about. Let's start by chatting about LSU, Texas A&M, within the framework of Johnny Manziel, and as Glenn pointed out in our pre-production meeting, if Manziel wants to make a run at this Heisman, he's going to have kind of a signature win, and this gives him the shot to do it. Daniel Palmer, thoughts on this game?
I think it could be a lot of fun for those of us who like watching high-level quarterback play. We saw the duel between Murray and Mettenberger. We saw McCarron and Mettenberger, and now we're going to see Manziel and Mettenberger. That's one, a lot of ends, and two, a lot of really good quarterbacking. I think this LSU defense has been kind of, I don't want to say maligned, but kind of, they've taken a backseat to the offense this year with the emergence of Cam Cameron as the OC and Mettenberger under center. I think we see a ton of points scored down in Baton Rouge. I think Manziel kind of has he steps up and has that Heisman game, like Glenn stated before in our pre-production meeting, read us drinking and talking about what we're going to talk about. I do think that A&M wins, and that I think it gets a bit more interesting with the Heisman race, with Mariota falling off, with Stanford getting knocked off last week. There's really the front runner's Winston, I think, in my eyes. I think McCarron gets invited. I think Manziel gets invited as a former winner, and I think there's a conversation to be had with all three guys in the Southeast if Manziel comes out with a second Heisman Trophy.
Yeah, from my perspective, I'm a numbers guy. Everybody knows that. They give me a hard time for that. But I look at Manziel's numbers, and I have a really hard time not having him right there with Jameis Winston. And Jameis Winston might be a more fresh take on the Heisman race, might be a newer name, might have returned Florida State to prominence in that regard. But let's not forget that this was a Florida State team that was supposed to contend last year. And I think people kind of make it sound like, Jameis Winston came in and now Florida State's relevant. Well, they were relevant last year, and they, could have, I think, performed a little better last year. So not to discredit what Winston's done, but the Cinderella-ness of this story on his part is not overwhelming, especially when I look at how much Johnny Manziel has progressed as a passer. Absolutely impressive to me. Glenn, any thoughts on this game or on Manziel?
What's so funny about Manziel now is that, think back to the summer when there was no football to be had. Every day there was another Johnny Manziel this and autograph that and all that. Where more or less now he's basically off the radar only because he did it last year, and he's putting up better stats. Unsubstantiated, but he's putting up better numbers this year than he did last year. So you would think, he'd be right up in the Heisman race. But I think whenever voters are looking at Manziel, they're afraid to give him a back-to-back win. And a lot of these are older dudes, and they're probably harking back to Archie Griffin, who's the only guy that's won it, twice. And I don't think they put Manziel in the same category. And Jameis Winston's play has given them that excuse to not give Manziel that nod for another Heisman. And now with this whole scandal thing going on with Winston, it might default Manziel back into the the top spot. We'll see how all that plays out, but.
Yeah, I think one thing that's crazy, from a statistical standpoint, A&M's 8-2, but we've seen 2 and 3 loss players win Heisman trophies. But if you were to tell me this time last year, or maybe before Manziel showed up, that a quarterback could put up a 187 efficiency rating and could basically account for 390 yards and 3.9 touchdowns per game, which is what he's doing right now.
There's the numbers, so
exactly. And not win the Heisman Trophy, I would have been blown away. Palmer, if you're voting, Winston or Manziel, who you got?
I'm voting Manziel personally. Like you said, statistically he's gotten better. I noted that when he sat in the first half of the game, that he looked sharper in the pocket. He was making be more confident in his reads, and that I thought that he really the Mike Evans connection helps him out a lot. And there's your other really component there is the Mike Evans thing. Is Mike Evans? I know that I'm a football nerd, so I troll a lot of the advanced metric sites. Stats are trying to catch on in football. And Mike Evans is rated as the number 3 passer in college football behind the 2 gentlemen catching balls down in Baylor because they got that record-setting offense. But Mike Evans is doing it pretty much as the not just the primary target, but just the guy who makes things happen after the catch. And I think that if you're going to invite Manziel, you've got to invite Evans. The only interesting thing that's going to happen now is we know that the voting is regional. And the question is, does the South split between McCarron, which would be more like a career achievement award, Manziel, which would be a recognition of a guy who already won it, took the challenge and didn't sit on his laurels and got better, or Winston, the new kid. And I hate to dismiss, I'm not dismissing Winston. I'm just saying, in the larger scheme, there's those 3 kind of barrels they fit into. And the question really is going to become, do they split the South vote and then have other regions decide? Or is there a viable candidate who's not named Jordan Lynch, who I'm not going to get into? He's a great player. I think he's a Heisman player. But is there another candidate out there that I'm missing?
That's the thing. I'm really hesitant to jump on the bandwagon with McCarron as a Lifetime Achievement Award just because of the Heisman Trophy. And I'm going to butcher the terminology here, but it goes to the most outstanding football player in college football. And I don't know that you can ever say that about McCarron.
Right. Well, I think at the very least, they're the voters, and they can bring 3 to 6 guys up there to New York they'll at least bring him to New York as
he'll get a trip.
tip of the cap. He might be the guy that ends up being somewhere in the 4 to 6 range in the voting, but he'll at least go to New York. I think the other, you said terminology butchering, like outstanding player or whatever, whereas, in the past, I guess since however many years back, it's the quarterback award, other than Ingram a couple years back, but
yeah, that's the interesting thing to me is that it's just become such a quarterback-dominated award. Palmer, how much of that do you think is media-related in that, we flock to quarterbacks, and I say we as guys who amateurly – is that a word? Sure. Amateurly write about football. I just coined it as a media member. But how much of the quarterbackness of this award, which is another new word.
If the Oxford word of the year is selfie, then you can say those things.
Yeah, quarterbackness, make it trend. But how much of this award, and its quarterbackness is tied to media perception and the fact that quarterbacks are great storylines, and how much of it is more a reflection of the fact that football's a passing-oriented game right now, and the trend is heading that way? Any thoughts on that, Palmer?
I think it's the second thing. I think 10 years ago, McCarron would have walked away with this thing, just in the style of offense he runs and the what he's asked to do inside that offense. I think the responsibility, kind of in the Peyton Manning vein, has been a lot's been handed to the quarterback. A lot more check at the lines, a lot more people coming in with 3 or 4 plays and making decisions on the line of scrimmage. I think people want it's chic to say the media is driving this to the quarterbacks, but the media has always existed. There's been a media pulse since 1940. Like, there's a reason that the quarterbacks are stepping up now and being recognized now, is because a lot of these are pass offenses, and that's something you've seen in college football that I've always enjoyed to watch more than in the NFL, is that you'll see an innovation come out, and then you'll see other people adopt it, and you'll see it kind of get mutated and changed. Now I'm going to kind of pivot here and talk more about Baylor for a second. A great piece ran on Deadspin today. I'm going to put it in the show notes later, but it was about why Baylor is porn for football nerds, which, first of all, is a great title for me. It just hits all my bailiwicks being porn in football.
I thought Crazy Got That was porn for football nerds.
Well, this really is. And so they talk about how you watch them on a field with a team that was at one time the forebears of the spread offense, like a Texas Tech last week. When they played Cliff Kingsbury, who was one of the first spread quarterbacks, and you see what Baylor's done with it. I'm just gonna reference the article a little bit, where they've extended the splits to where when you have an elite running game, that if we make one man miss, it's a 10-yard game. Are you guys hiding drinks?
We're refilling. Actually.
Oh, okay, fair enough. No need to hide.
But I didn't want to clink any noise. There's no hiding here.
Fair enough. Fair enough. But I just wanted to say, like I said, that's the best thing about college football is the innovation, and especially in smaller schools like a Baylor, who doesn't have the resources of a Texas or an OU or Oklahoma State. They're not only holding their ground with these teams, they're blowing them out of the water on a week-by-week basis based on the kids buying into the program and in the philosophies behind the offense.
Yeah, one thing that I've found interesting is, you see these quarterbacks like, Russell Wilson go from the collegiate level to the pro level, and RG3 certainly maybe, equally as great of an example. But how surprising is it to you now that the pro game is starting to mirror the collegiate game, and that trends are, being seen at the college level, and then pro offenses are adopting them to kind of fit the talent? It's kind of and I'll be honest, I don't know if that's something that's happened often before, but it's somewhat counterintuitive in that, you look at, you don't see a lot of, I guess you do kind of to an extent see some college teams adopting more high school-oriented playing styles, but do you think that's a new trend? Is that something we're going to continue to see?
No, that's something you've always seen in NFL football, and it's almost makes sense when you think about it on a macro level. The largest experimentation pool is going to be high school. That's where you've got the most places to play football. The pool gets smaller, and the ideas that work get funneled to college coaches, and the ideas that work there get funneled to the NFL. The difference in the NFL is this is these guys' full-time jobs. So what's a wrinkle one year, Wildcat, is inept the next. They're going to take it away from you, read option. They're going to find ways to scheme around it. But you've seen it happen. So the spread offense started in a Texas high school. I've read there's a long oral history of it, where you can trace it back to 2 or 3 high schools in Texas and how it's exploded across football over the last 15, 20 years. And the interesting thing to see is you can actually watch the prevalence of 3-4s and 4-3s. It always rotates between the two, but you can watch it happen through high school, college, and the NFL. And then you also watch it happen with families of coaches. Coaches that are brought up from high school coaches who become college assistants. College assistants who become college head coaches become NFL assistants. And they bring things with them because no coach has ever come with a blank clipboard and said, I'm inventing something new. You take bits and pieces and let's work where you've been, and you carry them with you forward. And it's about having the innovation and honestly, the courage to say, we're going to put our hat on this. Think about it. 20 years ago, the no huddle was an anthem. You saw it at the end of games occasionally and the end of halves. Now, Murray might come out and run the no huddle in the middle of the first quarter for 2 or 3 drives. And so it becomes more commonplace and becomes more accepted. And then when you see the NFL, eventually it gets squashed because those guys are really good, really fast, and there's less of a talent disparity.
Yeah, that's a great example as far as the no huddle. I mean, 10 years ago, one of the more common pieces of terminology you would hear, whether it was at your middle school or high school practice or on TV, was the 2-minute offense. They run their 2-minute drill. I can't remember the last time I heard that because now the 2-minute drill is more often than not something we see 7 or 8 times at least per game, or maybe for the entirety of the game. So it's a great example. If you're a high school coach out there, throw a patent on whatever playbook you have and whatever you're doing, and maybe you'll get some intellectual property rights off of that. Let's talk a little bit about Baylor. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, that's one of the great things, and I hate doing this because I don't like this team, but Nick Saban, one of the best things he does, if you've ever been, and you talk to anyone who's been to one of his coaching clinics, he doesn't treat it like the Ark of the Covenant. He tells you what he does on offense. He tells you what he does on defense. He just happens to coach it better than everyone else in the nation. And it's that kind of coaching, the ability to share the ideas, and that's what happens in summers when kids are training with street trainers. Coaches are out learning from other coaches, taking bits and pieces. And I think that's something that's a little underreported, and that kind of explains why there's so much similarity once you get to the highest levels, because the ideas that really do work have kind of borne themselves out.
Let's talk. Great point there, and let's talk a little bit about Baylor in particular this week. They've got Oklahoma State, so this is a number 4 versus number 10 matchup. I think it's the night game. I have no idea where game day is this week. Might be there. I don't know. That is the ABC game, 8 p.m. this Saturday. Obviously, I think we all expect a lot of points in this game. Glenn, any thoughts on who's going to win this one? I mean, conventional logic is Baylor's going to continue to roll, but any thoughts?
I'm a conventional logic kind of guy. I'll probably go with Baylor.
Palmer, looking at this game, I mean, I think we're probably in alignment. Unfortunately, without Chad here, no one disagrees. But any thoughts to the contrary?
No thoughts to the contrary. I want to confirm one thing. Game day's in Stillwater. And I want to go back to the thing I was talking about earlier about Baylor's offense. People who hear spread offense, they think passing and a lot and gun. But what Baylor does to you is they spread you out and then they run on you. And if you don't cover the outside, they're just going to check to a pass. So you've got to man up outside or at least a little cloud coverage. But once you've got that inside taken care of, they've got great blockers up front. The trick is the ability of those running backs to make someone miss in space. And unless Mike Gundy and his staff have tightened up that defense that I've seen be a little bit porous this year, they can't keep up in the track meet.
Yeah, I'm with everything both of you guys said. It's conventional that Baylor's going to win. I think Baylor's more – we like to use the term ambidextrous referring to an offense. I think they're much more ambidextrous than they get credit for. They can run the ball and they can throw the ball. And they can run the ball with their right hand or their left hand. So that's So I think they're going to kind of cruise with this. A quick thought I want to get some input from you on, because I do think this is relevant. And we'll come back to this game itself later. But Alabama plays Auburn next week. If Auburn were to beat Alabama, all of a sudden things are wide open as far as the BCS is concerned, and it's not an Alabama FSU thing necessarily. In fact, it'd be hard for Alabama to sneak back into there. If we're looking at number 3 and 4, the teams that could sneak in there, and we're looking at, say, an Ohio State and a Baylor, Palmer, who do you think, one, is the better team? And secondly, the follow-up there would be, would the better team get the nod in the polls?
I think, and we've kind of seen the trend as far as the BCS members have gone, I think Baylor's the better football team. I think that Ohio State would fall behind him in the polls. And I think that's one of the reasons that Meyer, I think he kind of knows that. I think it's kind of why you've seen him be a bit more public this week in his criticism of the system of the BCS, which he's benefited from plenty in the past. The interesting thing here is we can't assume that. I mean, I guess 2 undefeated teams make it in. That's probably going to work. But does Auburn sneak in? If they knock off a 2-time defending champion next weekend and then win an SEC title, could you see a one-loss Auburn team leapfrogging one of these undefeated teams?
And you got to really almost give the nod to Auburn over Oregon in that case, assuming they're both one loss. But the other thing that would be sort of, you got to think twice about, if Auburn beats Bama, they got the inside track from the West, right? And then you're looking at Missouri still in the driver's seat for the East. Not the marquee matchup anybody was anticipating for the SEC title game, for that, play into the national championship game anymore. But if Auburn is going to leapfrog Oregon, you got to have Baylor or Ohio State lose to make that happen.
Yeah, one thing that I find, I forget the name of this principle, but there's a psychological principle that says people follow and vote according to who fits the most prototypical result in the past. So kind of the idea, and this is usually discussed, I promise I have a point here, they usually discuss this within leadership. And so the point is, the most vocal, the most loud, the most defined, the most intelligent is not always the leader of a group. Usually it's the most prototypical that is the leader of that group. So in that regard, what's going to be interesting is to see the voters in this, the coaches, as well as, the computers aren't going to have an actual vote, but, within the coaches, who is the prototypical leader? Is it the idea, our notion, and, I think we all would agree the SEC is the strongest conference, and their idea is the leader, the prototypical leader, the winner of the Southeastern Conference, in which case it very well could be Auburn, or is the leader the team that was previously ranked higher? And I think there's a lot of kind of psychological rectifying that goes on at the end. You see, I think people vote very differently once they see the kind of end results of things, in the sense that if Alabama were to lose, I think voters might change their criteria slightly in the sense to make up for Alabama's loss by maybe putting Auburn into the national championship game, assuming they won it, even though Missouri is, like Glenn pointed out, a much lesser, opponent in some voters' minds within an SEC championship. So that's what's going to be crazy.
But then who is Missouri lesser than? What's Ohio State's best win?
Well, that's the thing that I think is interesting. But psychologically, you think, okay, well, we have a one-loss SEC champ, but they beat Missouri. On surface level, let's say that Auburn beat Missouri week 6, that probably has very little impact on their poll positioning, even if Missouri's undefeated at that point. But late in the year, I think people kind of start reconciling things decisively different, whether Auburn beat Alabama or not. If Auburn's in the SEC championship, which in this case, obviously, they have to beat Alabama to get there. But either way, people treat an SEC championship win, in my opinion, much differently than they do a win earlier in the year.
And who would have thought we'd be talking about the Iron Bowl with these kind of implications a week early?
And not only that, but who would have thought that we would even mention a scenario, and a scenario that's very much possible, especially as far as the East is concerned. But who would have thought we would be mentioning a scenario where Missouri and Auburn would be in there? I mean, our big debate, and Glenn wasn't here, so he can pretend that he thought otherwise, but our big debate heading into the season was, would Auburn or Missouri, either one, make a bowl game? And Chad's not here to claim that he said they would, so we're just going to pretend he didn't. I don't think even Chad thought they would.
Yeah,
go for it.
Chad's the contrary.
It's funny to think that just over a year or so ago, Missouri's coming in the SEC, and they made that T-shirt with North Carolina on it, to all of a sudden being, maybe they're the Cinderella story out of the SEC. Who knows?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see. Palmer, you there?
I am here.
Okay, cool. I think we went video dark for a second.
Scary.
Let's not get too far and too in depth in the Iron Bowl talks, but I mean, any thoughts on the whole? And I don't want to talk about last week, but I still stand by my assertion that I made mid-season, which is Auburn's not as good as their record. Would you agree or disagree with that statement, Palmer?
Just because I'm a football purist, you are what your record is. I can't say they're better or worse than the record because the record's the record. It's one of the best things about sports is it's a meritocracy. You get what you got. You earned whatever you got. And so for me to say that they should have lost X game or Y game, I don't feel comfortable doing that. I will say this. They're going to be facing an Alabama team that didn't show up in the first half of Mississippi State, that has something to prove, and that is going to be ready. It's funny because going into last week's game against the opponent who we won't discuss, Auburn was posited almost as a Georgia Tech clone, a team that can't pass. What we've learned is a team that doesn't have to all the time because they've got 4 or 5 guys back there who'll peel off a big run on you. And so it's going to be really interesting because that's where Bama's been best, is against the run. The way you've hurt them has been attacking through the air. The loss of Sinceri, I think, is really starting to show at the back end of that secondary. And we're going to have a real test to see just how complete a passer that Marshall can be at home at night against the best team in the country for the last 2 years.
With everybody watching, too.
Oh, hey, you know what? And that's the crazy thing. We were all watching last week, and in the times when you put pressure on Nick Marshall, he wasn't great. It's something I said, I think I tweeted it during the South Carolina game, is if you heat them up, they're going to fold. And I have questions to see really what happens. And the trick's going to be the Auburn offensive line because they held up for the first 3 quarters in that game last weekend. First quarter, they started not complacent so much, but their technique started to show because they've been on the field for a lot of plays. They're a little bit tired. Technique started to slip. And you saw the opponent, who shall remain nameless, make some big plays against the Auburn passing attack down the field and in the backfield. And that's going to be the question, is if Alabama can get to them early. If you get to them early, if you heat them up early, if you can get past those big uglies up front, I think you can have a very it can dictate the pace and direction of the game, unlike last weekend.
Yeah, I would say, and we're not going to name names or talk teams, but the team that Auburn played last week dialed up a lot of pressure out of desperation in that fourth quarter and had a tremendous amount of success with it. Their play calling on the last play that really mattered over the game, and I don't want to get so specific, I don't think it was necessarily bad, but it was decisively different than what was successful for the entirety of 8 to 12 minutes of football. To your point, all that to say, put pressure on that guy, and I think it's a very, very different outcome. It's going to be interesting to see what Alabama is able to do. It's going to be interesting, in my opinion, to see how Saban makes halftime adjustments. That's my favorite thing. None of us like Alabama. No. I love Alabama's halftime adjustments. I mean, as a football fan, it's incredible to watch. You can almost pinpoint exactly what teams have done well, both offensively and defensively, against Alabama in the first half, and you can basically script Nick Saban's halftime speech. Maybe not the details, maybe not how he's handling it, but you can script what he's addressing, and 9 out of 10 times, that's both addressed and it works. Palmer, anything to add on this?
Yeah, that's the cool thing about Belichick and about his coaching tree and Saban. And Saban, really, of the guys in that coaching tree, is the closest to Belichick, I think almost, if not personally, but in style similarity. And that's what has always been said about Belichick in the NFL is he lets you do what you want for 2 quarters. Then he figures out what you want to do, and he takes it away from you. He says, you're not doing it anymore. Here's what we're going to redictate the game. And that's what Saban brings to the SEC every week.
So let's talk about a few more games of interest. Ironically, I think CBS is showing a really bad 3:30 game. Yeah, it's Colorado State, Utah State, excuse me. But Glenn over here has a Vern Lundquist story, a personal encounter, so to speak, that he wants to share.
Well, all right. So I said I was in the Navy for a while. To backtrack a little bit, I went to the Naval Academy, and one of the jobs that I had while I was there was actually working in the press box for all the home football games. It was a meaningless job, but I didn't care because I got to eat free food and sit in a air-conditioned box for every home game, which included all the Army-Navy games, which usually were played up in Philly at the link. This one particular year, so my specific job was they would print out stats at the end of each quarter and at the end of the game,
I know my stat girl's in the box well at Sanford Stadium. He doesn't meet my qualifications. I'll say that much.
By a little shot. And really, they just wanted dudes up there in uniform. They could be like, oh, the midshipman. Oh, look, this is, that kind of thing.
Silly little Navy boys.
Right. Anyway.
Don't destroy the mystique.
Yeah. Anyway, and they had like 6 of us doing it. The job of one man, one stat boy was 6 of us. I digress. So me and a buddy of mine who's from Birmingham, huge Alabama fan, we'll leave it at that. We're like, all right, we're up in the press box at the link. It's our senior year for the Army-Navy game. And halftime, we're like, all right, we're supposed to bring stats to the TV booth. We'll both go. So we go and we hand the stats to the production assistant. And she's like, all right, thanks. And basically, we're done. That's it. And we say to her, can we speak to Mr. Lundquist? And she's like, yeah, no problem. So we're like, okay. We're kind of blown that it was that easy. And so here he comes. He waddles over our way. And
chortling the whole way.
Yeah, really, though. And he's like, oh, hey, I'm not even trying to impress him. He's like, oh, hey, guys, what are your names? Where are you from? And genuinely was as excited to talk to us as we were to him. And we're, sort of like, hey, I'm Glenn. I'm from Georgia. I'm a UGA fan. And my buddy, I'm Wilson from, Birmingham. I'm an Alabama fan. And he goes, well, my name's Glenn. And he goes, well, Clint, it's great to meet you. And he, went all in on the Clint. And it was like, oh, my God, I hear you say and butcher names every Saturday, and you've done it to me right off the jump. And and we talked to him for like 10 minutes, and he probably dropped my name more than in any 10-minute conversation that I've ever had with any person. But it was Clint.
Couldn't have been more wrong. That's great.
I let it slide. It was awesome. He was a super nice guy. I mean, he was as interested in us as we were in him. So I'll give him that. But, yeah, for whatever reason, I found myself in that scenario.
I will say he was particularly bad this past Saturday at the name thing. I mean, it's bad when you're talking about a team that I don't follow on a week-to-week basis, and I know you're wrong in the first quarter. It's pretty bad. Couple of shit. I got nothing. Palmer's going to run an errand, and me and Glenn are going to talk about Atlanta Braves baseball and their move to Cobb County. We both live in Cobb County. Palmer, his parents live in Cobb County. I think Glenn more or less agrees with Palmer. I think I do as well, but I'm admittedly much more self-motivated. I would go to maybe 4 or 5 games a year. I will probably go to 20 games now that they're closer. So, and I get it. Like, I'm being completely selfish here. My motivation is selfish. I recognize that. I see the drawings that everyone else sees of this new beautiful Turner complex, and I think Cobb County hasn't handled anything ever that well. There's no way it looks like that when it's all said and done. But, Glenn, any quick thoughts on the Braves move?
Yeah. What I think is funny, if you take a step back and go fast forward into the future in like 2017, 2018, when they've made the move and all that kind of good stuff, here's a parallel for you. You know how everybody's been up in arms about, the NFL going to that 18-game schedule, they're talking about player safety, but you want to add more games and all that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, people are still going to watch those 2 extra games. So at the end of the day with this, people are still going to go to that stadium. And I listened to the podcast a couple weeks back or last week, whenever you guys talked about the emergency podcast and everything. And I'm pretty much on the same page. I think it's a shame that a stadium that they hung their hat on the fact that Turner Field needs millions of dollars in upgrades, when just a couple seasons back they put in that nice big jumbotron that's high def, and the stadium's not even going to be just barely over 20 years old when they eventually leave. And when you look at teams like the Tampa Bay Rays and the Oakland Athletics that have 4 at best stadiums, and Turner Field, if they could wheel that down to Tampa, then they'd be in good shape. and you're just going to ignore that and demolish it, let alone all those seasonal workers that you're completely turning your back on that depend on that income. But we kind of, and Palmer, you can jump off on this, but we kind of talked off beforehand about how pre-production, about how about how it's interesting where I can see why the Braves are making this move from a business standpoint, but when you take a step back and I think they're totally ignoring the fact that they've got so much impact on a day-to-day basis in people's lives. I mean, you got the tax implications, but again, like I said, with your seasonal workers, the guy that, sells the beer up until the 7th inning in the stadium probably walks from his house around the corner, and he's not going to drive the extra, I know it's only 14 miles, but with traffic, come on.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, is that anyone who's familiar with the area knows the traffic is already hell at 75. And it's not going to get better with this. They're doing 10,000 fewer, I believe, parking spaces. So that's going to be a huge success. And the reasons that have been given by a lot of people, and I'm going to get semi-serious for a second. Someone said, one of the GOP commissioner for Cobb said, we don't want those people traveling up MARTA to Cobb. And we all know who he means by those people. And it's funny because people, and a lot of reasons I've heard from some people who are pro this move is, I'm so glad I don't have to go to that part of town to go to the baseball game. We've sold out every Falcons game for 10 years. And I'm kind of cribbing a point that I was talking to Bomani Jones about this, and he went to college in Atlanta, knows the city, and he said that the difference between the Braves and the Falcons is the Falcons ownership has put a concerted effort to reach out to the whole city.
Yeah.
And there's a reason it's filled every year, every Sunday. And meanwhile, the people who run the Braves have made a concerted effort to exclude an aspect of the city that's, and they're talking about a city that's 73% black. Let's just call it what it is. It's a majority black city, and for the longest time, this is a franchise that turned its back on that population. Whether it's whether it was being very open to trading and getting rid of your Rafael Belliards and your Fred McGriffs and your Otis Nixon,
Gary Sheffield,
and your Gary Sheffields and Terry Pendletons, but Chipper Jones is a Brave for life. And it's something it's always been kind of subversive and unspoken about the Braves climate, and it just kind of came out in a way that no one can truly deny at this point. And everyone's called Atlanta historically the city too busy to hate, and it's interesting because you can self-segregate in that city if you want to, and there's a franchise that has chosen not to. In the Falcons, they are 2-8 right now. They're hosting the Saints, and I guarantee that game tonight sold out, as they have been for the last 10 years. Even when Joey Harrington was under center, that dome was sold out.
Yeah, and to your point, all the reasons that the Braves brass are citing that they need to move up to Cobb County and all that kind of good stuff are all the reasons that they should have done those things in that area, and without completely rehashing everything you guys talked about in the podcast last week. I mean, hey, why did it take this long for you to realize that's what you should have been doing at that location all along? But I mean, I'm telling you something you already know.
Yeah, two points I'd make real quickly is what's surprising to me, and I don't want to get too deep into it because I've lived here 10 years, so I haven't been here my whole life. Which Palmer, you go. I'm assuming Atlanta your whole life, right?
We moved there when I was 3. My dad went to college. My whole life. Let's just call my whole life, yeah.
Yeah. So I moved here when I was, 15 years old, so well after the 96 Olympics. But, when MARTA was first discussed way back then, Cobb County didn't want it. But what's interesting to me, and I honestly don't have a further, more well-developed point on this, but it's interesting to me that the demographics in Cobb have changed so much over the last 17 years. And that the decision, as far as the leadership is concerned, is still the same. I think that's a reflection of poor leadership at any level on any decision. When your constituent base has changed that dramatically, and without even opening up a vote or a debate or anything along those lines, you stick to the same decision, That's very odd to me. The second thing, we talked about how you just mentioned, Palmer, the Falcons kind of catering and embracing the entire city. When we first moved here, you could get $100 Falcons season tickets. You're hard pressed to get a 5-game pack to Braves games for $100.
Yeah.
And that was the Falcons recognizing, okay, one, our product may not be a great product right now, but two, let's cater to our city. Let's build this dome up. Let's get people there. And to their credit, a lot of people that got on that ticket train then are still there. Yes, they're paying more, but a lot of people that bought those $100 tickets, whether it was young people, less economically advanced people, however you want to call it, a lot of the people that got those tickets for $100 for the season are still there. Maybe they're paying $400 now, but they're still there to their credit. People were grandfathered in. They avoided seat licenses. Exactly to your point, the Falcons have done what it takes, and I think in my mind, that's what makes the Falcons staying in Atlanta and getting a new stadium easier to swallow. And that, yes, it's taxpayer money, and it's not my money. I'm not in Atlanta. But, yes, there's the same kind of cost, but they've catered to the city. I think they've put more into investing into it. And to Glenn's point, the Braves have never done that. The Braves could have developed the area around them. They're raising most of the money from Cobb County through a revenue bond. They could have issued revenue bonds around Turner Field and done developments. That's not something that, is tied. That's not a Cobb County specific thing. That could have happened anywhere. And I don't think they've made a lot of efforts. Again, completely selfishly, I'm thrilled about the move. They're going to be, 9.5 miles from my home. They're going to be 7 miles from my office. I will take clients to the game.
It will take you 2 hours to get there.
Well, and that's the other thing. If I can make one other point is, it's going to take forever. I work in Marietta. I'm one of the few people. I work in finance. I'm one of the few people that work in finance and actually work in Marietta. Everybody asks me why I still choose to live in Marietta as well, because there's nothing for anyone under 30 in Marietta. I choose to live there because I don't want to deal with the traffic. So in that regard, it's very frustrating for when I'm not going to a Braves game, because it does now. I mean, it takes me 2.5 hours if I want to go to a Braves game right now. Legitimately, if I leave after work, which is usually the only way I can go. It takes forever. It's not going to be much shorter there, but it's going to take me forever if I'm coming out of the meeting downtown or Midtown or Buckhead, and the Braves are playing that night, which is quite a bit in the summer.
Right. And having said all this, and I think it's probably a good summation of what all of us have said, it's really leaving a bad taste in everyone's mouth from a fiscally responsible standpoint and from sort of a cultural impact standpoint with turning, really, I'm disappointed in how they basically, the Braves being they, turn their back on the area right there where Turner Field has been for 20 years, and they had every opportunity to do something about that, but they decided, we're not gonna. It just leaves a bad taste.
One thing I would add is, Palmer can speak to this, Glenn can speak to this. We're all in very different industries as far as what we do professionally. There's no such thing as a good surprise for your client, ever. Even if something really good and unexpected happened, you don't want to surprise them with it because you want to kind of present it in a way that builds value for yourself. If I said, hey, this investment returned more than we thought, I don't want them to find out spur of the moment. I'd rather say, yeah, I think we can get you more out of that investment. That builds more value for me.
Yeah.
The other kind of surprise is a bad surprise. Everyone would agree, regardless of what you do, whether you're talking business or life, there's no such thing as a good, bad surprise. It's really odd, to be up in D.C., to be at a conference that's not related to sports in any way, and all anyone was talking to me when they saw my name badge and saw that I was from Marietta, Georgia. Oh, are you going to be near the Braves Stadium? That sounds like a total disaster. What a surprise. And me actually saying, yeah, I'm a huge sports guy, I'm in that area, I was stunned too. That's usually not a sign of a really prudent and wise investment or whatever you want to call it. Go ahead, Palmer.
And that's the other thing that's kind of been creeping out in the last few weeks. And I want to thank, I know they don't listen to no one, or maybe one or two of them listen. The Deadspin guys and the Yahoo guys have been doing a lot of the yeoman work on this kind of thing. They revealed a lot of, I don't want to call them backroom deals, but they're backroom deals that have been in place for the last 6 to 8 months, of people buying up land in groups who are going to be financially benefiting, buying up land and buying up properties so they can build more strip malls in Cobb County and parking lots. And so there are groups out there. I know my dad's getting very worked up about having his taxes go to the wrong places. But it's going to be very interesting. I don't think this is it's a done deal in the spirit of it. I'm not entirely sure that this is a foregone conclusion that this happens on time. And I'll tell you right now, it doesn't happen on budget.
No, I mean, and that's a good point. The pragmatist inside me is thinking, oh, 2017, there's still a chance for this not to happen. I don't want it to happen. And the other thing, and we talked about this a little bit earlier in our pre-production meeting, I don't know the legal precedents and all this, but with Cobb County being expected to pay some tax dollars without it being at a vote, and it's got a private business that's making these decisions, are there grounds for some, like a class action suit of people of Cobb County to sue the Braves, or Cobb County, I guess, for them wrongfully, in some degree, having to pay those taxes? Again, I mean, I don't know if there's a precedent, but maybe there's some young law student out there listening to this that'll say, let me dig into this and try to make some money. Who knows?
Well, that's the interesting thing. So the deal is bypassing any sort of public vote. It's going straight to the Cobb County Commission on the 26th of November. It'll be a hike in all existing taxes. A new tax will require a voter referendum. So by choosing to hike existing taxes, that's how they've gone around. That's how they've superseded any sort of legal action by the residents of Cobb County. I know there are petitions out there against this just because of the financial impact it's going to have on the area. The other thing is, like I said, the proposal is the annual cost over 3 years is $400,000 in new rental car tax, $940,000 from the existing hotel tax. Like you're going to fly into Atlanta, get a cab to Cobb County, and get a rental car there. $2.7 million in new hotel tax, $5.1 in property tax property tax increase. There you go, Andrew. And $8.6 in relocation of existing Cobb County property taxes, which means that they'll be refunneled and redistributed.
At least I was honest and I said I didn't know that stuff. Most somebody did. Well, totally teed him up for it. Atta baby.
Yeah, no, but and like I said, this is going to be an interesting thing, and the 26th is going to come, and the vote's going to pass, and we'll see what happens. But and the numbers I gave you are projected over the 30-year term of the lease. If you think the Braves are still happy with their stadium in 30 years, ask me in 5 years when I knock down Turner Field, which will be 20 years old.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add as far as any kind of recourse or objection to what's going on is the Cumberland area has a community improvement district, which basically, for those who don't know, you can set up a business CID, community improvement district, and raise your own taxes on your own district if businesses in that district approve it. So this is not a county thing. This is not a state thing. This is its own CID. They are throwing down, I think it's $10 billion, and I could be wrong on that.
Here you go. I've got the numbers for you right here.
Throw that down.
Click on the right thing. There you go. Bam. There you go.
Wow.
What's he doing? How much?
It's 2.7 in the CID for Cumberland Hotel Motel.
Yeah.
And then the 5.1 is the CID tax increase.
Yeah. So they're levying this there, which is an insignificant amount relative to the whole picture, undoubtedly. But what you have to realize is that Cumberland is over 80% of Cobb County's actual commerce on a revenue basis. It's a huge concentrated area that if you weren't looking, you would think you were still in Atlanta. It's just outside. It's 75, 285. That's a huge percentage of the county's revenue. And what they do, it really is viewed as kind of the leadership of the county. And this is, just coming from different, business organizations that I go to meetings for and sit in on. Like Cumberland CID is viewed as we don't question what they're doing, and whether for better or worse, sometimes they do a lot of great things. But the fact that so many people, one, work there and are hearing about this, two, so many people own businesses there, three, so many people live in that area, it's hard to picture, even though there are petitions going around, it's hard to picture the support overwhelming a community that has its own CID that's generating 80% of the county's commerce as is. And that's not saying, again, I'm not saying they're right, but that's just the state of it. Is you've got this one concentrated area that's saying, hey, we'll levy up money for it. And obviously, it's the area that stands to gain the most because that's where the stadium's going to be. But it's going to be hard to see, in my opinion, as a local resident, it's going to be hard to see anybody, kind of going further, whether that's a chamber of commerce or what have you. Most organized business affiliations look at Cumberland CID because it was the first in the state of Georgia with a lot of respect. There's a new one right near where Glenn and I live, the Town Center CID. They're kind of the model. Cumberland paved the way, and so people kind of view them as at first a renegade, kind of this odd idea of we're raising taxes on our own businesses, but also as a great success story because that area has kind of thrived over the last couple of years. Palmer, we're going to wrap up. We've talked about the Braves a lot. We've talked a little bit about college football. Any closing thoughts maybe up to this weekend, anything like that?
No big closing thoughts. Columbia Senior Day this weekend. They're playing Brown at home. I'll get to send off the seniors the right way, hopefully. Go Lions. I'm going to try to stay warm in this ridiculous amount of cold. And anyone who wants to question, and I've heard a lot of pushback on the Cobb County thing about the stadium. Last thing I would say is to get to Cobb County, you cross over Lester Maddox Bridge. If you don't know who Lester Maddox is, please Google him. And that's how you get to Cobb County, and that should tell you all you need to know about the history, at least. This is the county that the torch avoided in '96. They wouldn't go through it. So that should tell you a little bit about the history of Cobb County as far as their welcoming of those people.
Counterpoint, I own property here, and we all know how great of a guy I am.
False.
So, one of the lesser points of pride for this county certainly is its acceptance, even again to the point earlier, despite its changing demographics and all of that. That's what blows my mind. I mean, I don't acceptance from anyone. I don't expect that from everyone at any pace, but it's like at least have the sense and decency to recognize changing trends. That's all I ask. Even if you're not going to do things for the right reasons, do them for commercial and self-motivated and economic reasons. And Cobb County still will do that. So not a whole lot to be proud of here. But Glenn, any closing thoughts?
I came on admittedly as not a guy that knows a ton about college football. This is a college football website podcast. I guess
you held your own.
I swam instead of sank.
You acquitted yourself very well.
Yeah.
I will say this for Glenn: we need to. We missed the boat on having him on a Breaking Bad podcast.
Mm.
That boat's never.
We could honestly
It's
just.
on Netflix.
True. No. Hey, we're still good because there's gonna be the spinoff.
That's right.
We got
Better Call Saul.
Better Call
He's our
Saul
guy.
spinoff. We're still okay there.
There we
And
go.
maybe at some point in the future we can get some kind of Braves baseball action going.
Yes.
Who knows?
I would very much like to explore the realm of baseball podcasting. Most baseball fans I know are really boring. Glenn is not. So I think we could maybe have the niche of actually somewhat entertaining baseball podcasts. Shout out to all the baseball podcasters out there.
That also listen to this podcast.
Yeah. All 0 of them. That's going to be my closing thought. I'm going to be in Athens this weekend. I'm going to be at the game. I'm going to be there early. I'm going to be tweeting from the field coverage of senior night. A lot of great seniors. Obviously, Aaron Murray, not the least of them. Aaron wants a blackout. If you're going to the game, wear black. Don't black out. Drink responsibly. I'll be honest. I think black jerseys are happening. I really do. They're saying they don't have them, but
Fingers crossed.
We don't have them before. And let's just be real. How long does it take to make a black jersey? Not very long.
Or that crate is full of towels. They are not jerseys.
Little known
They are
fact,
towels.
Andrew has a background in textiles. He knows how long it takes to buy a jersey.
Let me say this. All it takes is a little paint. There's still options.
You'll never be an equipment
black
manager.
jerseys, I'd volunteer to do it. All you need is 100 fans to paint one jersey each. We're totally good. So at the very least, fans, wear your black. I'm going to wear my black even in the press box. I'm going to dress like the Grim Reaper. It's going to be awesome. Blackout. That's all I got. Daniel Palmer, what's your Twitter handle?
TPalm66. Follow me there.
Follow him there. You got picks going up on DudeYouCrazy.net tomorrow?
Yeah, the last week the blog machine ate them, and so I've got them pretty much formulated this time. I've written them elsewhere. I'm going to copy and paste and send it straight up tomorrow morning.
Very good. Glenn Moyer, where can we find you on the tweet machine?
Glenn, second in is silent, _ like the symbol, Moyer.
Very good. I'm Andrew Hall. You can find me on DudeYouCrazy.net or at DudeYouCrazy on the tweets. And that's all we got. Have a good weekend.